On this episode, we have PEI's most prominent developer, Tim Banks. Tim and his affiliated companies are currently in the process of building hundreds of homes and adding them to the PEI housing supply. In addition to Tim's many business and development achievements, one of the things I admire about Tim is his willingness to open himself up to criticism by engaging in conversations on important topics on PEI with a particular emphasis on housing. One of the big ironies is that Tim often gets a lot of pushback from affordable housing advocates, yet Tim may arguably be the person doing the most on PEI to fix the housing crisis by building up the supply side, including hundreds of affordable units. On this episode, we'll discuss the importance of development to build up the supply, what gets things built, unintended consequences of certain well-meaning government interventions, how to maintain and build vitality in our communities on PEI, and any other topic that we veer into. You're listening to Chattel Fixtures PEI Real Estate Podcast. I'm your host, David Cyrus MacDonald, and welcome the one and only Tim Banks.
Thank you, David. Pleasure to be here, speaking about housing on PEI in general, and look forward to the discussion.
Yeah, awesome. So maybe first, is the, what people are calling the housing crisis, I think fairly in a lot of ways, is this a solvable issue?
It's always a solvable issue if people want to work together to see that things happen. And the unfortunate part of it, it's like the perfect storm. Interest rates, material costs, labor force, and then the politics of the regime related to the red tape.
Right.
And there are four big things to overcome. There, to my thinking, that we're really in a housing crisis, an emergency crisis.
Right.
And I think that the only way to really solve it is for the province to step up and take over some of the authorities with respect to the Planning Act.
Oh, okay.
And it was interesting, Rob Lance in the news yesterday, speaking about going up as opposed to going out. I've been advocating that for 40 years. I've attended so many meetings related to, it's cheaper to build up, and it keeps our island closer together in the communities that were built, and stops urban sprawl.
Right.
And so I think there are lots of solutions, but the solutions have to be people working together, and it has to be people forgetting about whether it's in their backyard or not. We all live here,
right,
and we all have to work together.
Yeah, why do you think it is that there's resistance to going up?
I'm sorry for laughing, but there are people who really think that they can't see over the buildings.
Right.
Look, I've gone to so many meetings, and I can't answer that question. I have no idea. I'm puzzled.
Right.
It's if you can build 4 stories high, 39 feet or whatever,
right,
you're compromising each level of the floor because you can only have 8-foot ceilings. The marketplace now, with the way people have grown, and kids are 6'4" now and 6'5", they're more comfortable with 9-foot ceilings. And
right.
And for some reason, whenever you talk about going up, there's always a gang that, particularly in the downtown,
right,
that for some reason, I don't know, the shadowing of the building and the streetscape, 4 stories high versus 110 stories high, no different from one side of the street to
right,
the other.
Particularly with that amount of width.
Yeah,
right. It's going to still.
So it's puzzling, and it's unfortunate because in Canada we have, and in North America for that matter, the last 5 years there's a term called flight to the core.
Right.
And essentially what that means is that cities, their downtowns, are booming.
Yeah, right.
Go to Halifax. If you were there 10 years ago and you walk through downtown Halifax today, you wouldn't recognize a lot
totally.
of it.
I mean, go down to Argyle Street, for example.
All over the place.
All over the place,
Basically what's happened in that market in the HRM is that it's outpaced the outside HRM from a number of new units.
Right.
Here in the city of Charlottetown, below Euston Street, I think the statistic is for every one unit that's been built below Euston Street, which is the downtown, there's been 27 units built outside of Euston Street.
Right.
And that is a dynamic or a number that should tell our political leaders that doesn't make any sense.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Sorry to interrupt. We got a dog barking in the background. I think
not mine.
It's not your dog. It's not your dog.
But I get accused for it. Somebody in Twitter be saying, "Oh, that's his dog."
That's his dog. Oh, Tim and his dogs. Yeah. Wow. So 27 north of Euston Street for every one in the downtown area, downtown core, and so,
and that was basically brought in with what's called this 500 lot zoning bylaws that really prevent developers from really being able to tackle a project down there. And in any other city, be it Moncton or Halifax or St. John or whatever, we have competitors.
Yeah.
In fact, in the Halifax market, there's 25 Tim Bankses.
Right.
And I have no competitors here.
Right.
And my lawyer once said to me when I was looking at, getting annoyed at the city, he said, if it was easy, there'd be competition, right?
Right.
Yeah.
Right.
And so all of those who've come over, guy comes over, he buys the Guardian building, he's going to put a couple of floors on it, he's going to do hell and all. And when he really gets down and looks at the constraints that he's stuck within the bylaws in the city, he just can't develop the property the same way as he's been doing in the Halifax marketplace.
Right. So he has experience elsewhere. He's bringing it here. He's going to be increasing the housing supply, and he stumbles into the same thing that other people stumble into. Like, oh wow, this is not easy.
And it's not easy. And if it was easy, as my lawyer said, everyone would be doing it. And listen, I'm the first guy who loves competition.
Yeah.
Competition makes my company better.
Right.
Because we get up every day and we have to be ahead of our competition.
Mm-hmm.
And if I have no competition, we get slack.
Right.
And I don't want to be slack.
Yeah.
I want competition.
Right. But you can't get it in this marketplace. One of the things I've noticed with I feel like your name might be the name that gets in the media the most on PEI, or one of the top in terms of.
Well, it does if you want to look at a Twitter, scramble going on there.
Yeah.
But if it's CBC coming to talk to a developer about development, they'll end up talking to some guy that's built one building and they call him a developer.
Right.
And they're scared to ask the tough questions.
Right.
Yeah, that's the unfortunate part. But anyway, I don't need to be and don't want to be in the media all the time. I just want to do good for my community.
Yeah.
We live here and we're proud of what we build here.
Mm-hmm.
And we've been doing it for a long time.
Mm-hmm.
And if somebody wants to go point out a project that we didn't deliver to the extent that we said we would in the first place, I'd be very surprised.
Right. So, and I've seen you push back on things. So sort of a lot of people that whenever there's pushback comes on them, the temptation is kind of the wind flows this way, just kind of fall over and say, okay, I'm out of here. Whereas you, I don't know how you've kind of learned this skill or if it's something you've always had, but you appear, at least from my perspective, to not be afraid to push back and say, hey, listen, this is the way I see it. If we don't get this is what's blocking us from getting this done, and you letting people know on Twitter, this is what's preventing this from happening, and pushing it back, and then the project seems to get done. If you didn't have that pushback, if you didn't have that tenacity, do you think that these projects would get done?
Well, I was reminded on a walk last night about Ed Sheraton, who fought back on somebody on the copyright, the singer.
Oh, okay.
And I think it
Oh,
was
Ed Sheeran.
Ed Sheeran.
Yeah.
And I think he said this, is that
I think it was Marvin Gaye's estate was suing him.
They were suing him, and but what the issue was, I think, really boiled down to his grandmother or someone in his family died, and he couldn't go to the funeral, and it really hurt him. And the reason he couldn't go is he couldn't let those people get away with what they were trying to say, because then it would be just a whole bunch of people being able to do the same thing, and there'd be, so he fought it all the way. It cost him a lot of money,
right?
And I think at the end there was some kind of compromise, but he did win,
right?
And it would have been how do I say it? Would have cost him a lot less to just do nothing.
Right.
But it wouldn't have set the background. So for me, I'm going to push back when I believe there's some common sense to what we're doing, and what we're doing is good for the community, because I have to show the guys that are coming behind me, the young guys, that, look, you just don't have to accept what somebody tells you. If it makes sense, then you should try to tackle it and try to get it done. And I learned that lesson when I was very young, and I think it's been instilled in me, and unfortunately, some people think I'm a little too aggressive, and what can I say? Yeah.
How do you reconcile that when there are haters? I mean, probably most of them is people kind of hiding behind a screen name on Twitter, but
there's a lot of them.
Yeah.
I call them out, and if it gets crazy, I just block them, and I don't need to. I've got lots of stuff to do with my day, and sit there and work on a Twitter account.
Yeah, actually, well, I mean, speaking of lots of things to do, I mean, owner of APM, but it was funny. I was trying to do research on what all companies you're in, and I just was like, okay, I give up. I don't.
Well, look, I really do enjoy what we do, and I do really enjoy people who work for us. They're really my team. They're my company. And so when we're going to war in something, I got some great soldiers behind me.
Right.
And some people with some real depth and some real experience. And that's important in anything you do.
Yeah.
You got to have a team. And I'm pretty proud of ours.
Yeah, absolutely. Well, it's been going for quite a while now. Actually, thinking back, it's interesting to see how, I would say from my perspective, and you would have a much deeper understanding of this, but it seemed like the talk, considering things to be a housing crisis, the talk of that really sort of hit a fever pitch in, say, 2019, starting in maybe 2018, around there. But in 2015 or so, vacancy rates were around 8% in Charlottetown, right?
Yes.
What was it like to be a developer then?
There is so much opportunity here, and it's always in the eye of the beholder. So we talk about interest rates today. My business is 43 years old, and for over half of it, the interest rates were well above 5%.
Right.
And you have to work within the framework that you're working in. And but I had I'm one of the founding directors of Killam Properties, and gained a lot of experience there in that marketplace. And so when times are like 8% vacancy, you just have to make sure that the projects you pick and the investments you do make sense. But there's still lots of opportunity.
Yeah.
And PEI traditionally, in a lot of ways, have been always a few years behind on something happening. I think we all know that. And I'm not saying, that's something against us. I'm just saying that. So, for example, in the housing market in apartments, in the Halifax marketplace in 2015, the Class A buildings with parking garages and those kind of things were probably in the 20 percentile
Oh.
Where here in the Charlottetown market, we're at the 5 percentile.
Oh, okay.
So there was that deficiency. So if you came to the marketplace in 2015, you had to recognize that maybe I should be building buildings with parking garages.
Right.
Because they seem to be where the marketplace is going in other markets. And so now that's a big feature. Our new building that we just opened in Sherwood has a parking garage.
Right.
And there's 39 units there, and before occupancy, we had them all rented out.
Oh, wow. Yeah. Yeah. And so, I mean, the parking garage, that's a lot more expensive for parking than a parking lot.
Yeah, it's a bigger investment, but in the long term, you're going to get your return. If you're going into the apartment business, you have to look at it that it's not a short-term venture. It's something that you get your return over 15 to 30 years. And so if you have to invest into a parking garage, the numbers have to make sense. But there was a bit of pent-up demand here for that. So that's an example of what you would do in a market where there's big vacancy. You try to find the type of vacancy that's deficient.
Yeah, absolutely. So you're still navigating it, and your team's still actively out doing it. You're not sitting back and saying, well, some people are doing really, because I mean, if it's 8% vacancy rate, it's not like every place is 8% vacant.
Exactly.
There'd be some places that would have dramatic vacancy, and some places that would be just completely filled. So, I mean, okay, so we talked a little bit about supply in the intro and your building supply. I feel like a lot of the discussion around housing inventory and housing pricing from the rental market perspective has been around the cost of housing, but it seems that there's been definitely some talk about kind of the economics of supply and demand, but that seems to take a back seat in some cases. Can you explain in a way that any audience member would understand the value of how, by increasing the supply of housing in the market, that might help kind of down the line create affordable housing opportunities?
I can do it by talking about going out to a car dealership during the pandemic to buy a truck, and they didn't have any trucks. There was short on supply. So when you got one, some of the people were paying over retail for them. There was no discounting. Pre-pandemic, you were getting $10,000 to $12,000 discounts on these trucks. So now that the market has come back and you can drive out to the local dealership and find 30 or 40 trucks in the marketplace, all of a sudden you're seeing compression on the discounts. The prices have gone up on them because prices have gone up, but the competition component of it pushes the price back down.
Yeah, exactly.
And that's the same as if we were in an 8% marketplace here today, I'd be given 3 months and 4 months free rent, and I'd be finding ways to get occupancy. So the only way to do that is to lower price so that it's competition. And so the unfortunate part, these housing advocates for affordable housing don't understand that the more housing that comes into the marketplace, the compression is going to push the price down.
Yeah, and I think often too, like where, say if you have a body that comes in, and whether it be the government or like a housing co-op or something like that, and they acquire housing, that doesn't actually change the supply of housing in the marketplace, versus if there's new housing built, that increases the supply.
That's correct.
Yeah.
So the thing about it is that, whether it's high end or low end or whatever it is, the more housing, the more competition, the more landlords are doing two things: is they're focused on their price and focused on their repairs and service. And when they're not making any money, they're not going to fix their roofs, and they're not going to maintain their buildings to the extent that they need to do that. So
and then if we had a high degree of high amount of supply, it's probably not immediate, but you can imagine the knock-on effect of someone being like, ooh, that place is nicer, I'm going to move there. And if I could get that for, say, the same price, I'll move over there. And then that person is left with that vacant place, and they're like, oh, wait, our place costs more than that nicer place. and there's more other options for people to have. How are we going to get people in here? Well,
they're gonna upgrade, and they're going to lower the price.
Yeah,
and that that's what they're going to do. That's what the market dictates.
Yeah, we're pretty far from that now, though, in terms of the supply. We just have such an influx of population, and the development seems to be. I mean, you're building hundreds of places, but that's kind of a rare exception in a lot of ways. Like, how is it even possible to?
Well, I think the thing about it is we have to build them because, I have businesses that are looking for, we're trying to expand those businesses. For example, our Storemark, our fixturing company, we built a new plant. We have to get new workers. We've got new CNC machines. We have to get people who are trained in them from away to come back to come and run them. And we have to have housing for them.
Right.
And it's as simple as that. And I'm not the only business in town that is doing that. People grow and businesses grow, and to do that we're going to have growth. And then the other thing we're seeing in the marketplace is this driven people who've been away from our province, who were born here and went away and built their careers and have sold their homes. And this is a safe community, Prince Edward Island. They want to come back and they want to live here, and they don't all want to live out in the, on the shore or whatever. Some of them are comfortable with downtown Charlottetown if they had the right amenities in their building.
Yeah, up
to the standards that they've been used to living in other cities.
Yeah,
and unfortunately, we're stuck in this pyramid of heritage or something. I don't know.
Yeah, and then what do you think of the rent freeze?
Yeah,
how can we explain that in a way? How can you explain that in a way that anybody, would understand? Maybe because there's on the surface, it's like, okay, freeze the rents, great, rents don't go up, so renters maybe they say yay. What are the unintended consequences?
Well, I've been dealing with some situations where smaller landlords are coming to me now, and in one case, a group have 16 units. And so last year they lost money, and now they have to renew their mortgage, and their mortgage payment is up like 80%. And now they're going to lose more money, and their insurance is up like 22%, and so they're under pressure, and the mortgage lender, being the banks, are looking at Prince Edward Island, and they're saying, "Geez, are we going to lend into a marketplace that is not, giving a reasonable return of investment into, investors that want to be in that discipline?" So I think in the short term, it's going to cause problems, but just going to get worse.
Right.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Traditionally, in the other 9 provinces, Canada, you have market turnover.
Yeah.
Somebody vacates your premises on their own accord, then generally the landlord brings it back up to market price. And if they do that within reason, the market accepts it and moves on.
Yeah.
But here, to be stuck at a fixed rate and to be stuck at an operating rate where it's cost most landlords about 8% more to operate, like 8% more than the previous year, and they get 0%. Not a very good number.
And it's kind of like a very blunt kind of thing. It's like, no, from wherever you happen to be in rent price, regardless of what it was, like what the rationale for it being that rent price. I know people that didn't raise their rent for, a decade plus, and they were just,
they're caught.
And they're stuck.
They're stuck, yeah.
And then I talk to people who say, well, this isn't going to work this way. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to take it out of the rental market and I'm going to turn it into a condo. And then that gives them potentially an opportunity
to get their equity out.
To get their equity out.
Yep.
Exactly. But then that decreases the supply in the rental market.
Yeah, that's true.
What's that?
That's very true.
And it can displace the current residents. But I mean, if people are underwater and they're looking for a way to get out, then it's like logical that would be the decision that people would make.
When you got a loser.
Yeah, what are you going to do?
What are you going to do?
can be like, oh wait, all of a sudden there's a solution here.
Yeah.
So again, one of these unintended consequences.
Yeah, it's unfortunate, and I think where it came from is, we had these three-party system in our politics.
Yeah,
and everyone went to the left of everything, and each party is talking about landlords needing to have cats and dogs in their homes, and people not understanding that these.
Oh, I'm sure you've had some cat stories. I've done a really small scale, and I had a nightmare cat story.
We do the best to work with our tenants.
Yeah.
And you have to do the best, but you can't just set a set of rules where you're going to allow dogs and cats into somebody's investment and they terrorize it, and you have to replace the carpets and door frames and doors and just beyond the pale, eh?
Yeah.
And then you got other you got other tenants within the building that are scared of those pets, and
chose to live in a place that was pet.
And so
free,
so this is what the politicians were focused on.
By the way, both of us have dogs.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
But no, and listen, I'm a big supporter.
Yeah.
But again, it has to be within reason, right?
Mm-hmm.
And the landlord has to have the discretion to what he has to do. And so they're in the house and they're bringing forward these changes to the rental
affect
act
everybody.
that affect everybody,
and just like a kind
blanket
of
thing.
Blanket
they
thing,
should,
just
but they don't show up when you're trying to get a building permit and
Yeah.
you're at a public meeting and they're not there. They're not there saying this is a good idea. Let's put our hand up. We're going to support it. And they're not there.
And it can seem like people that it can seem
they're
to
out in
people
Point de Roche. They're out there
Point de Roche,
chasing away, a summer resident who wants to invest in our community.
Yeah.
That gets us a tax base to help our healthcare system.
Yeah.
That's what they want to do. They want to make a movie of it.
Right. Yeah.
Craziness.
Yeah, I did. I followed the link to the Point de Roche website that you put up, and it is an interesting story because I had seen the first side. I was like, and my first impression was like, oh, come on, they took over the beach here, that's unfair. And then I went to the website and was like, oh, they actually cleaned it up and now have less of the beach. Yeah. And they got rid of
putting a walking path
story.
There's more to the story, and they're putting a walking path over the top of it. The same as I did in 203. I put riprap in front of my cottage.
Yeah.
And today, 300 or 400 people a day go over the top of my riprap, and they walk and enjoy the beach.
Right.
And I don't chase them off or do anything like that. It's it's fair game. I love everybody enjoying our island. But to stand out there and chase people away from PEI when we got a housing crisis.
Yeah.
And somebody's trying to build a house.
And it wasn't that long ago where conversations around rural revitalization, people were scared, especially in rural communities, of saying, listen, we have an aging population. Yeah. We need people here who are going to work. We need people who are going to support the economy, pay taxes, because healthcare stuff's, expenses are going to go up, that kind of thing. And now we've got kind of there's been some relief to that. Yeah. But then at the same time, we have this kind of crunch of, okay, now we have to figure this out. And I think there's a temptation often to kind of villainize. Well, it's an ironic thing I mentioned early on where it's like you take a lot of heat and you're comfortable with kind of standing up to that heat, while at the same time you may be the single person doing the most in terms of solving the housing crisis. So it's an ironic thing, isn't it? Like that pushback.
Yeah, it's hard to believe some days. There's a particular group called Housing PEI.
Yeah, I saw you replying to their tweets.
Oh my God Almighty! They've never showed up at a meeting. They've never met They've never met with me or any other developer. But they want to tear us apart.
Right.
And they don't want to find a solution.
So how many units have they been building?
Oh, I shouldn't be laughing.
Oh,
like, seriously, I want to work with these people.
Yeah,
I want to work with everybody. We live here, and we want to do good. And you get into that stupid politics of social media. Christ, I drive a nice car. Next thing I know, I shouldn't have the car. I should have turned it into an apartment, I guess.
Yeah, what do you think about that? What do you think about that where...
I don't think about it.
Okay.
Yeah. There's an old story about a guy in Mount Stewart who owned most of Mount Stewart at one time, and insurance was coming in. And one of the locals was in the store one day and asked him, are you going to get any insurance? And he said, no, I don't think so. He had everything paid for and whatever. And they said to him, well, aren't you worried? He said it didn't cost him a thought.
Right.
And it doesn't cost me a thought. They can abuse me as much as they want. I'm
right.
comfortable.
Yeah.
I work hard to invest in my community, and I work hard to do good in my community. And I work hard to work with my employees. I pay them a good wage, above market wage.
Right.
And I'm good in my own skin. And if I want to drive a Lamborghini, I'll drive a Lamborghini.
Yeah. Do you still have the Taycan? Porsche Taycan?
No, I have. I drive a Tesla now.
Oh, you do? Which one do you have?
I have the Tesla X.
Oh, the Model X. The Model X Plaid. That's a beautiful car.
It is a beautiful car, but it's over getting serviced now.
Oh, is it in Halifax?
But I'm driving my wife's Y.
Oh, nice. How are you enjoying the Model Y?
It is without question one of the nicest cars on the planet.
Yeah.
It is a beautiful vehicle.
I think it's the top selling car in the world now.
Yeah. It's a beautiful vehicle.
Yeah.
And my wife was a little apprehensive at first about getting it, and she went into a Tesla center when I was up picking up mine, and so anyway, we bought one, and she drives it the majority of the time. Yeah, against her other cars.
Oh, probably with your dog, you probably love dog mode. Do you use that?
I love. Listen, that's the reason I do not have the Porsche. They're in a different platform. Porsche are very. I forget the word, but they want to control everything. Right. Where, in Elon's case, somebody asked him 6 or 7 years ago about what you do about dogs in your car. And his response, look, I'll get back to you. And then 2 weeks later, every Tesla in the world had dog mode in their car. Yes. And so I take my dog everywhere. And as we get somewhere, if he's not going to jump all over the place, or if he's going to, then I'll leave him in the car and I hit dog mode. And you walk up to the car and the screen says, look, don't worry about my dog. My owner's going to be back soon, and it's 20 degrees. Yeah.
And it sort of maintains the temperature to the desirable thing, gives you a notification if the battery's getting low.
Oh, exactly.
Yeah.
They're way ahead of it. And we should be that way with housing. Instead of in the same token, right? We should be in. It's nice to see the province going with the pre-built in this climate here, and I think that in the future there's going to be more of that too. Right. But we have to develop that industry here as well. Yeah. And we took a crack at that years ago with our Roseneath homes. We should have followed through a little better. And then instead of doing it for cottages, we should have been looking at it, been a little more forward thinking. However, there's 4 or 5 good manufacturers in Atlantic Canada, and they could be part of the solution.
Right. Yeah. That's it's interesting with that too, because you could get kind of an assembly line going, and hypothetically there could be scale advantages in terms of cost. Is that right?
Yes.
And do you find that to be the case?
Well, they're not there yet. Yeah. But they're going to get there. And height and density are the 2 contributing factors to get efficiency on price. Right. And then affordability on the material side of it. And they have a little more control of that through the winter, be able to build them.
Oh, okay. Yeah. And
so that's the other side of it that, will help too.
Right. And I suppose, like, just to break that down a little bit in terms of the kind of scale and height advantages, where you're dealing with, even if you have a smaller footprint, that your land cost is less per unit, just as one example. And then you're putting in one foundation to serve a greater number of units. And then you're bringing your all of your transportation cost of your goods is going to one place instead of spread up. Your crew's working in one place.
Yeah, look, there's just so many efficiencies. It's unbelievable. There's a point, though, like once you go past in wood framing, you go
and then
past
go to
5
steel.
stories, you have to go to steel.
And then you probably have to get up to a certain size before that starts to make sense.
You need to get
again.
to about eight stories before it makes sense. And I think that's
higher than the Basilica.
Maybe
Is
not.
It? Oh, okay.
Yeah, maybe not. But we have lots of 8 and 10-story buildings in the downtown core, and there's no reason why there couldn't be another 15 or 20 of them, and still be a prosperous heritage city.
Yeah. Yeah, how do you keep the vibe with that? I mean, is that mainly just
the vibe is there now? It's going to stay.
It's going to stay.
Nobody's going to knock down a heritage building to put one of these up.
Right. Yeah.
So it's just really, a perfect example of that is the K's building, whereby we purchased it. Engineers said it couldn't be restored.
Yeah.
We got a structural engineer from Amherst, Jim Giffith.
Okay.
And we worked hard with him, and we rebuilt the superstructure within the building, and then we added a new building to the next of it and built a whole block there. So you got the new, the old, all works.
Right.
And you walk down that streetscape, beautiful.
Nice.
Yeah.
Nice.
And there's no reason we couldn't, on the new part, gone 6 or 8 stories. Wouldn't have made any difference. The K's building is still there. People still go into the pizza place and go into the coffee place, and they look at the restoration and the framework and all that kind of
it's
thing.
beautiful.
It's beautiful.
Yeah, it is.
And there's no reason we couldn't continue to do this. But planners get involved, and then they draw up these 500-lot bylaws that just don't make any sense.
Right. Yeah. Right. What's the solution to that? How do people have a voice in encouraging that to allow positive?
Well, I don't think what they don't understand is on Richmond Street, for example, our little building next door to the condo building that was there. We built a 4-story, 39-foot, 8-inch high building with 23 units in it. And back in that day, it should have taken us 16 months to build it. Mm-hmm. From the day we started to the day we put a tenant in, it took us 5 years. Ooh. We got appealed to IRAC twice, and then the owners decided they would try a solution of going to the Supreme Court, the condo owners, and
the neighbors.
The neighbors. And the day before that, they withdrew at the Supreme Court, which then allowed us, and that was like 3.5 years later.
Right.
And then prices went up, interest rates went up, construction costs went up, and then we had to do it through the winter, and it was just. So our projected rent of $1,000 a unit ended up about $1,700. So it goes on the back of the tenant because we can't lose money. Our mortgage company expect us to pay the mortgage, and but the $1,700 that we charged there at the same rate when we went to market, there was other new units in the downtown core that were built. There were $2,600.
Right. Yeah. Oh, yeah.
So we're substantially below the market because it costs you a lot more to build in downtown. Yeah. Just because your footprint is more, and all the site and soil conditions and the labor time it takes. You're out in a green field, things go up pretty quick.
Right.
Do tilt up in the walls and you do stuff. But when you're in downtown core, it costs you more. So and the land costs you more.
Yep.
So everything is, so you really have to go up to get the affordability to it.
Yeah, and you can imagine too, say if it was a developer who had just done a few houses and they're working their way up, and this was their first kind of bigger project. I mean, this could completely destroy someone financially if they were doing that. I mean, they'd have to be, imagine going back to their investors. It's like you don't have that experience. Presumably you were able to manage that. You have cash flow controls. You have your,
It's still tough, And you just have to deal with it as it happens. And so a lot of people say, well, we announce a new building, and in the old days we'd say, well, the rent's going to be so much, and we book you for it. Today, we have no control over that. The building we just opened in Sherwood on June the 1st of 2022, we gave a purchase order for the elevator and signed off on the shop drawings. Now, typically, they would have that elevator up and running in 4 months. And the elevator got up and running on June the 26th of 2023.
Oh, okay.
Because they had to wait for a chip.
Oh,
just like they do in a truck, Right. So it's the supply chain, and nothing they could do about it, nothing we could do about it. And that delay and that project, it's a $13 million project or whatever the number is.
Yeah, you run the interest on that alone.
It cost us close to $1 million in overruns. Wow. Yeah. $1 million. And I got some guy, and he's got the little thing here calling us out because our price is what it is.
Yeah.
It's kind of sad.
Taxation on PEI. There's a lot of taxes we pay. Where
it's not PEI.
In Canada.
That's the key to it. And, big liberal all my life. We're going in the wrong direction. I think we really have to sit back and look at the competitiveness of our country. So it's not just isolated to PEI. It's a Canadian issue, and we're taxed on everything.
Yeah,
and it's just getting worse and worse. And
what's the problem with that? I mean, obviously, we have to pay more for things.
I don't have the solutions.
What do you think? Do you have where you would reduce
I know what
the spending?
I know what I do on the housing front.
Right.
It's Alec Campbell back in the day when he came in with the development plan. Our tax was like 8 or 9% or 10% or something like that, and he forgave tax on new homes.
Right.
He said, "Gone. Going to do it for a year or two, no tax." Jeez, there's more new homes on the go than you could shake a stick at, because everybody figured it out that, look, that's sort of the down payment we need. Let's figure out how we're going to get this done. They got 95% mortgages from CMHC.
Right.
So here, you build an apartment building, you pay 15%.
HST.
It's a big deal, and you get back, you might get back 6% of it. I don't know what the number is.
Right,
but there's a big number there that they could forgive just to get the boom going.
Right. So that's a quick action.
That's a quick action, yeah.
Well, Tim, I'm not going to take any more of your time. We covered a lot of what I wanted to talk about. I just thanks so much for making time here.
No problem.
Yeah, I guess that's it.
Okay, great.
Awesome. Thanks, Tim.
Thanks. Appreciate it.
Yeah, my pleasure.